You think your thoughts are your own, but they aren't. Right now, your decisions are being hijacked by manipulators who know exactly how to push your buttons, and by blind spots in your own brain that override your logic. Here is every way you are being controlled without realizing it, starting with the most dangerous mind games used against you.
Predatory mirroring. We tend to like people who seem like us. The same tastes, the same jokes, the same way of seeing the world. It feels like proof we've found someone who gets us. But in the hands of a manipulator, that reflection isn't coincidence. It's a mask. Predatory mirroring is when someone deliberately adopts your interests, your speech patterns, even your body language, to lower your guard. They're not showing you who they are. They're showing you who you are. Every shared "me too" makes you feel more connected, more understood, and less likely to question their motives. Serial con man Robert Hendy Freegard used this tactic for years, pretending to share his victims' values and fears until they trusted him completely. To one woman, he mirrored her patriotism. To another, her paranoia about spies. Once they believed they'd found a kindred spirit, he convinced them to cut ties with family, give him money, and even go into hiding for years. That's the danger of predatory mirroring. The moment you realize the connection was a performance, the person across from you has already mapped your desires, your weaknesses, and the fastest way to use both against you. The authority effect. Sometimes the most dangerous manipulation doesn't come from a con artist or a cult leader. It comes from someone holding a clipboard with a title that demands respect. When we believe someone is an expert, we're far more likely to follow their instructions, even when every instinct tells us not to. Psychologist Stanley Milgram proved this in the 1960s. Volunteers were told they were helping with a study on learning and memory. An authoritative man in a lab coat instructed them to deliver electric shocks to another person whenever they answered incorrectly. The shocks weren't real, but the screams were. Still, over 60% of participants kept pressing the button all the way to the maximum voltage, simply because the man in the coat told them to. This blind obedience isn't confined to laboratories. During the Cold War, U.S. civil defense agencies told schoolchildren to crouch under their desks to survive a nuclear blast. The advice defied all common sense. Anyone who'd seen photos of Hiroshima knew a slab of wood wouldn't stop an atomic firestorm. But because the orders came from government officials, millions obeyed without question. The authority effect is still at work today. Every time a credible figure makes a claim we don't question because of who they are. We like to believe we'd spot the manipulation, that we'd never be the one pressing the button or ducking under a desk, but history says otherwise. Third place infiltration. Home is your first place. Work might be your second. But your third place, the bar where you unwind, the coffee shop you frequent, the gym, the dog park, is where your guard is down. You chat with strangers, share routines, and reveal more than you realize. A watchful predator knows these are fertile hunting grounds. They're not charging at you head-on. They're blending in, observing, learning. They figure out your patterns. When you show up, who you talk to, what puts you in a good mood, what annoys you. They become a friendly fixture. Before long, you start looking forward to seeing them. That's when they start weaving themselves in deeper. A casual ride home, an offer to watch your dog, a shared hobby. Bit by bit, they turn a public, low-stakes space into the foundation of a private connection, one you didn't ask for but feel awkward breaking off. It's the same tactic used by Dirty John, a master manipulator who charmed his way into women's lives before revealing just how dangerous he could be. He met women in gyms, coffee shops, and hospitals, posing as a charming acquaintance. Over time, he learned their schedules, needs, and vulnerabilities, then used that familiarity to slide into their personal lives and exploit them. The place you thought was safe becomes the very thing that gives them a direct line into your life. When you finally realize what's happened, they know your habits, your friends, even where you live, and suddenly, stepping away feels a lot harder than it should. Intermittent reinforcement. The fastest way to hook someone isn't by rewarding them every time. It's by making the reward unpredictable. When rewards are inconsistent, the brain stays on high alert, constantly scanning for the next hit. Dopamine spikes not just when you win, but when you think you might win, which keeps you locked in the loop even when the losses pile up. Psychologists saw this effect in B.F. Skinner's experiments with pigeons. When food was given on a fixed schedule, the birds ate when it arrived, but when it was given randomly, the birds pecked obsessively, sometimes hundreds of times with no reward, unable to stop. Humans aren't much different, and casinos exploit it mercilessly. Slot machines are unpredictable. They pay out just often enough to keep you pulling the lever, chasing the high of the last win. You can lose for hours, but the next spin might be the one that changes everything. That might is what empties pockets and ruins lives. In relationships, the same pattern can be weaponized. A manipulator showers you with affection and praise, then goes cold without warning. Just when you start to pull away, they flood you with attention again. The warmth feels like proof they care, but it's really bait to keep you in the cycle. Victims cling tighter, hoping the good version will come back, and in doing so, they accept more and more of the bad. Intermittent reinforcement doesn't just control your actions, it rewires your sense of what's normal, until even the smallest scrap of reward feels worth any amount of pain. Leveraging. All it takes is one mistake, one tiny breach of the rules, one act you think no one will notice. To an opportunist with an agenda, that single misstep is gold. From that point on, they don't need to charm or persuade you. They just have to lean on what you've already done. In prisons, inmates have perfected this into an art form. It might start with a request that feels almost harmless, like slipping them a cigarette. You know it's against the rules, but it seems minor. The moment you give in, you've handed them a weapon. The next request is bigger. A phone call you're not supposed to allow. Time in the yard past cutoff. A message delivered to another inmate. If you hesitate, the reminder is waiting. Yeah, funny thing. I wonder what your warden would think if he knew you gave me that cigarette. That's exactly what happened to a Georgia corrections officer in 2019. It started with a single, unauthorized snack from the commissary. Within months, she was moving cell phones, drugs, and cash. By the time investigators closed in, she'd crossed so many lines that her only options were to keep helping, or face prison herself. The genius of leveraging is that it traps you in your own actions. The more you comply to keep the secret buried, the deeper you sink, until the only way out is to risk everything. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort you feel when your actions and beliefs don't match. Manipulators create that tension on purpose, because the urge to resolve it can make you easier to control. When your brain is in conflict, it looks for a way to reduce the discomfort, often by changing your beliefs to match your actions, even if those beliefs aren't true. Hazing is a textbook example. The grueling, demeaning, or even dangerous tasks you're forced to perform don't align with your personal values. But once you've gone through them, your brain needs to justify why you put yourself through such humiliation. The easiest way to resolve the dissonance is to raise the value of the group who hazed you. If they're worth it, then what you endured wasn't meaningless. It was a mark of honor. The same mechanism works when a con artist gets you to publicly vouch for them before you have all the facts. Once you've staked your reputation on their credibility, your mind resists evidence that they're lying because admitting it would mean admitting you were wrong. That gap between reality and your public stance is the dissonance, and it pushes you to rationalize the situation rather than reverse your position. The more extreme the conflict between what you believe and what you've done, the stronger the pull to change your beliefs. And when that dissonance is exploited, you end up defending the very thing that harmed you, because admitting the truth feels more painful than staying loyal to the lie. Social isolation. A manipulator doesn't have to lock you in a room to trap you. They can dismantle your safety net one thread at a time. Friends, family, coworkers. One by one, they slowly disappear. The process is so gradual you barely notice it's happening. It often starts with small, seemingly reasonable remarks. Your friends don't appreciate you. Your sister always causes drama. Your parents don't treat you well. At first, you dismiss them, but each comment chips away at trust, making the people you once relied on seem less safe, less worth the effort. You start canceling plans and stop returning calls. Before long, the people who might help you are gone, not because they left, but because you quietly shut them out. With no outside feedback, you rely on the only voice that remains. Their version of events becomes the version. You learn to read their moods before you make decisions. You accept their explanations because there's no one left to compare them against. That's the endgame. Dependence. They become your confidant, your interpreter, your fact-checker, your lifeline. The exits still exist, the phone still works, the door still opens. But you won't use them because with no one else to turn to, leaving feels more dangerous than staying. Tactile influence. The first move isn't always force. Sometimes it's just a touch. Not a slap, not a grab, just a light brush on the arm, a guiding hand on the back, a squeeze of the shoulder. It feels harmless, even friendly, but that's the point. Tactile influence works because we're wired to associate physical contact with trust and cooperation. A stranger's touch, especially delivered casually, bypasses suspicion. Your brain doesn't flag danger, it starts softening your resistance. Ted Bundy understood this. When he lured women to his car, he didn't act like a monster. He'd play the part of an injured man, arm in a sling, asking for help. The moment a potential victim stepped close enough, He'd guide them with a gentle touch, leading them toward his vehicle, toward isolation. That small, seemingly benign contact created a sense of connection that made people follow without thinking. Salespeople use it, politicians use it, scam artists use it. A fleeting touch can make you agree faster, buy more, give up more. It doesn't have to be aggressive to be controlling. It works because it feels natural, almost comforting, and you never even notice that you've been led someplace you didn't intend to go. Playing dumb. Some of the most dangerous manipulators don't shout, threaten, or intimidate. They play dumb or feign incompetence. It's a calculated act designed to make you feel comfortable or even superior. They'll tilt their head, ask innocent questions, or pretend they just don't get it. And that's when you start letting your guard down. You explain a process. You share a detail you normally wouldn't. You take on more responsibility because you think they can't handle it. Meanwhile, they're studying you, learning your habits, and quietly stacking the odds in their favor. Take Anna Sorokin, the fake German heiress who conned New York's elite. She acted like she was lost in the world of credit cards, invoices, and hotel checkouts, forgetting her wallet, claiming she didn't understand American tipping, and pretending to be helpless with logistics. People rushed to help her, picking up tabs worth thousands. By the time they realized she wasn't naive, the damage was done. When someone plays dumb, they're not being cute. They're creating a smokescreen so you won't notice the trap until you're already in it. The illusion of choice. You think you're deciding for yourself. You're not. You're being handed a menu where every option feeds into their plan. That's the illusion of choice, a trap that makes you feel like you're in control when you're already boxed in. Seasoned operators never say, do this. Instead, they give you 2 or 3 paths that all lead to the same destination, theirs. You feel like you're steering, but you're in the passenger seat. In sales, it's the car dealer asking, are you the type who makes smart investments or the type who lets opportunities slip away? Suddenly, walking away feels like admitting you're reckless with money. In politics, it's ballot measures with loaded wording like, do you support raising property taxes, or do you oppose funding our children's education? The framing makes it seem like saying no to a tax increase means you don't care about kids. It's not democracy, it's design. Authoritarians, cult leaders, and corrupt executives all use it. They want you to feel ownership over the decision because people defend the choices they believe they've made themselves. Once you've stepped inside that framework, you stop asking the most dangerous question of all. Why are these my only options? And in that silence, they win. Door-in-the-face technique. In 2014, a man posing as a charity worker knocked on the door of an elderly widow in Florida. He told her he needed $50,000 to rescue his dying nephew overseas. When she refused, he acted wounded, but then said, I understand. Even a small contribution would help. Could you maybe spare $500? She agreed, relieved she could help without bankrupting herself. What she didn't know was that the nephew didn't exist. The charity was a front, and the scammer had already used the same script on dozens of seniors. The $50,000 plea was never meant to succeed. It was bait, a psychological setup to make the smaller request feel safe and moral. That's the door-in-the-face technique. Lead with the impossible, then settle for what you wanted all along. Abusive partners use it to chip away at boundaries. Fraudsters use it to open wallets. And in some cases, organized crime has used it to pull people into criminal acts they never imagined they'd agree to. You think you've negotiated them down. In reality, they've negotiated you in. Name usage.
Hey!
Your own name is one of the most powerful words you can hear. It bypasses the usual mental filters and makes you feel seen, acknowledged, and connected, even when the person saying it is your enemy. Skilled manipulators use this like a scalpel. Slip someone's name into conversation at just the right moment, and they unconsciously lean toward you, trusting more, resisting less. Serial killers have weaponized this. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, sprinkled people's names into every interaction, from his victims to the police officers hunting him. In letters to law enforcement, he'd greet detectives by name, as if they were old colleagues. In conversations, he used names to feign intimacy and make his targets feel less like prey and more like acquaintances. It was part of how he convinced people to let him get close enough to strike. The effect isn't limited to monsters like Rader. Salespeople, politicians, and con artists all know that names act like a shortcut into your trust. Hear your name at the right moment, and you might miss the fact that they've already stepped inside your defenses.
Those are the social power moves people use to gain leverage, but the next level is much more personal. These are the emotional traps designed to exploit your feelings. Projection. You're dating someone who cheats, but somehow you're the one accused of being unfaithful. That's projection. It's when someone takes their own flaw, wraps it up in gift paper, and hands it to you like it was yours all along. You'll hear it in arguments. They're the one lying, but somehow you're the dishonest one. They're furious, so suddenly you have an anger problem. It works because it scrambles your brain into defense mode. Instead of calling out their behavior, you're stuck justifying yourself, which is exactly what they want. The worst part? The more outrageous their accusation, the more energy you waste proving it's not true, while the real culprit stands there calm and collected, watching you defend crimes they committed. Emotional blackmail. On the surface, it sounds like love or desperation, but underneath, it's pure control. If you leave me, I'll hurt myself. If you don't do what I want, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. That's emotional blackmail. Threats and guilt used like handcuffs, locking you into choices you never wanted to make. The reason it works is simple. We're wired to avoid hurting the people we care about, even if they're the ones twisting the knife. They set up a trap where the cost of saying no feels unbearable, so you give in. And every time you give in, their leverage grows stronger. Emotional blackmail doesn't just bend your decisions, it rewrites your sense of responsibility. Their feelings become your burden. Their threats become your cage. And the worst part? You start to believe that keeping them stable isn't just your problem, it's your duty. Stonewalling. Ever tried to argue with a brick wall? That's what stonewalling feels like, except the wall is someone you care about, and the silence is deliberate. They don't shout, they don't explain, they don't even flinch. They just shut down, leaving you stranded mid-sentence. The power move here isn't in what they say, but in what they don't. Every unanswered question, every stare at the phone that never lights up, every night spent next to someone who pretends you don't exist. It all pushes the burden back on you. You start raising your voice, yelling just to break through, until somehow you're the one who looks unhinged while they sit there calm, untouched. Their silence forces you to carry the entire argument on your shoulders, and the more you push, the worse you look. While you turn red in the face, they don't have to prove a thing. You've already become the villain in the story they wanted to tell. Future faking. They tell you about the dream vacation, the cozy house you'll share, the kids you'll raise, the life you'll build together. Sounds perfect, except none of it is real. Future faking is a manipulation that runs on promises with no expiration date. Every plan dangled in front of you isn't meant to happen. It's bait to keep you invested. Why leave when you're this close to that beach trip, that proposal, that happily ever after? The fantasy is designed to glue you in place. And here's where it really bites. You start making real sacrifices for fake tomorrows. You skip other opportunities because you've been told you already have plans. You swallow today's red flags because it'll be different once you move in together. By the time it finally hits you that the future was never coming, your present has already been wasted. Shaming and humiliation. Your partner cuts you down in front of their friends or makes a joke at your expense at a party, and everyone laughs while you stand there pretending it doesn't bother you. That's humiliation, turning your embarrassment into their entertainment. Humiliation has a quieter twin, and that's shame. Shame doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it's just one cutting remark dropped in private about your weight, your intelligence, your worth. Nobody else hears it, but you do, and you replay it on a loop long after the moment is over. Humiliation stings in the crowd. Shame lingers when you're alone. Together, they do more than just bruise your ego. They train you. You avoid the next argument, the next joke, the next reminder that you can be reduced in an instant. And soon, you start managing yourself the way they want, just to dodge the next blow. Gaslighting. You remember your partner yelling at you last night. The words, the tone, the slammed door, it's clear in your head. But the next morning, they look at you blankly and say, "That never happened." You're imagining things. At first, you try to brush it off. But when this kind of denial keeps happening, about what was said, what was done, even what you saw with your own eyes, you start questioning your own memory. That's gaslighting, rewriting your reality until you can't trust it anymore. The tactic works because memory isn't a perfect recording. It's flexible. So when someone insists over and over that you've misremembered, your brain starts bending to their version of events. You don't just doubt the argument, you doubt yourself. And once you stop trusting your own perception, you lean on theirs instead. At that point, they're not just winning arguments, they're deciding what your reality is. And when someone else controls your reality, they control you. Moving the goalposts. You apologize, but it wasn't the right words. You spend more time with them, but it's still not enough. You finally do exactly what they asked, and suddenly, the rules change. One day they insist all they want is honesty, and the next, they tear you apart for being too blunt. Every time you meet the standard they set, they shift it just a little further away. The cruelty of this tactic is that it makes approval impossible to earn. You pour more effort, more time, more of yourself into proving you measure up, while they sit back and rewrite the rules mid-game. You're running a race where the finish line can never be reached. Over time, you stop asking why the goalposts move at all. You just accept that it's your job to keep running. And the more exhausted you get, the easier it is for them to claim that you were never good enough to begin with. Withholding information. It's not always what someone tells you that matters, it's what they leave out. Like when your partner doesn't mention the text they sent their ex, or they conveniently skip the part of the story that would change how you see it. They didn't technically lie, but you were never given the whole truth either. The power of withholding is that you don't notice it at first. You keep filling in the blanks yourself, making excuses, assuming they would have told you if it mattered. You end up doubting your own instincts instead of questioning why you're always the last to know. And once you catch on, it's already too late. They hold the missing details like currency, deciding what you get to know and when. You can't argue against what hasn't been said, but you still feel the weight of something missing, like a puzzle with the most important pieces locked away. Love bombing. At first, it feels like a dream. Constant texts, dramatic declarations, big gestures that make you feel like the center of their universe. Nobody has ever made you feel this wanted so quickly. And that's exactly the point. It isn't about love, it's about speed and saturation. The attention comes in a flood so intense that you don't have time to step back and ask whether any of it's real. Compliments stack on top of gifts. Promises stack on top of future plans, until your sense of connection is built on sheer volume, not substance. When that flood suddenly dries up, the game reveals itself. It wasn't love, it was a setup. The point of the overwhelm was to hook you fast, to build a dependency before you even knew you had one. Once you're attached, the silence or withdrawal hits twice as hard. Now the balance shifts. You're working to earn back something that was never real in the first place. Negging. It sounds like a compliment, but there's a catch. You'd be really attractive if you lost a little weight. You're smart for someone who never finished college. That's negging. Praise with an insult hidden inside. It works because compliments are supposed to lift you up. But when the praise is poisoned, you feel the need to prove yourself worthy. Instead of questioning them, you start second-guessing yourself. Maybe you should lose the weight. Maybe you're not as intelligent as you thought. That's where the manipulation takes hold. You're not just dealing with an insult, you're stuck chasing validation from the same person who cut you down. And once they've got you chasing, they control when or if you ever feel good enough. Guilt tripping. You say no to something simple, a favor you can't do, a plan you can't make, and suddenly you're not just declining, you're letting them down. After everything I've done for you, you can't do this one thing for me? I guess you don't really care. With one sentence, your reasonable boundary gets reframed as selfishness. They don't argue the choice, they argue your character. Instead of standing by your decision, you find yourself defending who you are. You're not fighting about weekend plans anymore, you're fighting the label of being ungrateful, careless, or cold. And in that fight, the easiest way out is to give in. Once you've caved, the pattern takes hold. You stop making choices freely and start shaping them around one goal, avoiding that accusation again. Each time you give in, more of your independence erodes. Before long, your decisions aren't yours at all. They're just the path of least resistance, designed to keep the guilt off your back and leading exactly where they want you to go. Polarization. They don't just want your attention, they want it uncontested. So they plant doubts about your closest people. Your friends don't really get you. Your family never wanted us together. Piece by piece, they drive a wedge between you and everyone else who could give you perspective. Once the circle shrinks, you've got nowhere to turn. Every outside voice sounds suspect. Every bit of advice feels loaded. And while you're busy questioning everyone else's loyalty, the manipulator cements their own. The end game is isolation. But by the time you notice, it doesn't look like they cut you off. It looks like you chose it. Either way, now that everyone else is gone, you're entirely in their control. Even if you block every manipulator in your life, you still have to deal with the enemy inside. Here is every way your own brain sabotages you. Prediction loop failure. You see it coming. The coffee cup teetering on the edge, the full glass next to your elbow. You lock eyes with the danger like it's a movie in slow motion, and then you knock it over anyway. Prediction loop failure happens when your brain simulates an upcoming action and still lets it happen. Your motor system plans movement slightly in advance. Meanwhile, your perceptual system flags a problem. But those two don't always sync. The brain sees the future mistake, even simulates it, but doesn't override the muscle memory already in motion. It's a disconnect between recognition and inhibition. You know what's about to happen. Your brain even throws up a warning preview, but without strong enough urgency or friction to halt the action, you follow through anyway, as if the preview was part of the plan. Tip of the tongue. You know the word. You can feel its shape in your mind. You know how many syllables it has. You even know what letter it starts with. But when you open your mouth, all that comes out is static and shame. The tip of the tongue phenomenon happens when your brain retrieves most of a word's information, but not the actual word itself. It's like the brain grabbed the folder, but not the file. The concept, context, and even sound structure are loaded. But the final step, lexical access, is missing from the chain. This glitch usually happens with proper nouns or uncommon words because those are stored less redundantly. If you forget the word air fryer, your brain can still reach it through kitchen thing or that noisy cube that makes fake fries. But forget the name of that actor from that one movie and you're left with a blinking cursor and a slow descent into madness. The failure comes from a mismatch between recognition and retrieval. You can picture the actor's face, the scene, the soundtrack, but not the name. The shape of the memory is there, but the label won't load. The harder you try, the worse it gets. Your brain tightens its search criteria and locks out access. That's why the name almost always comes back at 3 a.m., long after you've stopped caring. Semantic satiation. You're writing something perfectly normal, the word knee, let's say, and then, out of nowhere, the word looks completely fake. The letters are wrong, the spacing is weird, you're suddenly convinced you've invented a nonsense word, and your brain refuses to accept it. This is a form of semantic satiation, when repeated exposure to the same word or image starts to break down your perception of it. Neurons involved in recognition start to fatigue, and the brain's confidence in that pattern begins to fall apart. The result is visual dissonance. A familiar word starts looking alien, and your internal dictionary turns its back on you. It doesn't just happen when you're writing either. Repeat any word enough times, take milk, for example, and it stops sounding like language and starts sounding like a mistake. You'll question whether that's what we've always called it, or if you just invented a noise. Your brain relies on fluent pattern recognition to make words feel real. Break that rhythm, and the brain breaks with it. Post-task memory wipe. You put on deodorant, or maybe you didn't. You unplug the curling iron, lock the front door, close the garage. At least, you think you did. But 5 seconds later, you're halfway down the block, questioning whether any of it actually happened. Post-task memory wipe happens when the brain treats a completed action as a background process, something handled automatically, without storing a clear memory of it. Once the task is done, your brain clears the space to make room for what's next. The result? You're left rewinding the moment in your head, trying to remember if it actually happened. This is especially common with high-frequency tasks, the ones you do often and on autopilot. The brain doesn't bother to encode a detailed memory because it assumes you'll do it again soon. It values efficiency over certainty. So you check and double-check and triple-check, not because you're forgetful, but because your brain genuinely didn't bother to save the file. Freudian slip. You're talking to your boss, and you accidentally say, "love you," before hanging up. You meant thank you, or maybe bye, but your brain chose chaos. That's a Freudian slip, when your mouth reveals something your conscious brain didn't plan to say. Technically called parapraxis, this happens when two competing neural signals overlap, what you meant to say and what your brain associates with the situation. The result is a verbal misfire, where parts of different speech plans merge and something unintended and often uncomfortably revealing comes out. Not every Freudian slip is a secret confession. Sometimes it's just word proximity. You call your teacher mom because both live in the same mental filing cabinet. Authority, routine, attention. Your brain grabs the wrong folder, and your mouth runs with it. But sometimes it is a little telling. You meant to say, that was a bold move, but it comes out as, that was a bald move. Now the person's wondering what you really think of their haircut. And honestly, so are you.
Déjà vu.
You're deep in conversation with someone you just met and suddenly, it hits you. The exact way they said that sentence, the pause, the room. It all feels like it's happened before, only it never did. That's déjà vu, the eerie, involuntary feeling that you've already experienced something that's actually happening for the first time. It's a perception glitch, where the brain mislabels the present as a memory. One theory says your brain processes the same moment twice, once subconsciously, then again a split second later with full awareness. When that second version arrives, your memory system picks up on the faint echo and wrongly tags it as a repeat. The moment feels familiar only because it was just seen, not remembered. Another theory points to a neural misfire in the medial temporal lobe, particularly the hippocampus and surrounding regions that manage familiarity. The circuitry that usually flags past experiences fires off at the wrong time, making a brand new moment feel like a memory, even when no memory exists. It's not a psychic premonition, it's not proof of a past life, it's just your brain playing a strange version of double-take and tricking you into thinking you've been here before. Misplacing object in plain sight. You're staring right at the thing you need, your keys, your phone, the charger, but somehow you don't see it. You look everywhere, you check the counter twice, then, 5 minutes later, it turns out it was on the counter the whole time. This is a failure of visual attention, not eyesight. Your eyes may land on the object, but if your brain doesn't expect it to be there, it filters it out. Vision isn't just about receiving information, it's about interpreting what matters. If the object doesn't match your mental search image, your brain treats it like background noise and moves on. Context matters more than clarity. If you're looking for your black phone and it's sitting on a dark granite countertop, your brain might literally blind itself to it. And then your mom or your partner walks in, points right at it, and says, "It's right there." It feels like they've been gifted with some magical object-finding power, but really, their attention just isn't being hijacked by your search bias. Your brain prioritizes what it thinks should be relevant and ignores the rest. It's the same reason you can miss a typo in a sentence you've read 10 times. Familiarity makes your brain stop checking. The object isn't hiding, your attention is. Accidental thought swap. You're halfway through a sentence when your brain suddenly tries to change lanes. 2 thoughts, 1 mouth. You end up saying something like, "I need to charge my dinner." This glitch happens when your brain is juggling multiple speech plans and accidentally merges them. You were about to say, "charge my phone," but we're also thinking about what to make for dinner. Your brain tries to say both, and your mouth catches the crossfire. Your brain doesn't generate speech one word at a time. It builds entire sentence structures in advance. When 2 of those structures start competing, pieces get swapped, spliced, or overwritten. The result is a sentence that's grammatically correct but conceptually broken. It's a multitasking error in your language buffer. And even though it makes you sound like you've lost your mind, it's incredibly common, especially when you're tired, distracted, or already thinking about what you're going to say next. False memories. You remember exactly where you were, what you were wearing, who was there, what was said, you'd swear on it, but none of it actually happened. False memories aren't just bad recall. They're confident, vivid recollections of things that didn't occur. Your brain generates them using the same systems it relies on for real memories. That's what makes them dangerous. You don't just think they're true, you know they are. Memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you recall an event, your brain pieces it back together from scattered fragments, sounds, visuals, emotions, context. And every time you recall it, the memory subtly changes. Details get smoothed out, swapped, or inserted, especially if you've talked about it, imagined it differently, or heard someone else describe it. And if you repeat it enough, even casually in conversation, the version you're saying becomes the version your brain saves. The repetition strengthens the false details until they become the memory. Eventually, it hardens into a clear, confident version that may be entirely fictional. And because it feels real, your brain files it under truth, often permanently. Sensory misrouting. You're driving at night, trying to find a street sign. It's dark. You're squinting. So naturally, you turn the music down. That makes no logical sense. Your ears aren't blocking your eyes, but your brain acts like they are. This is sensory misrouting, when your brain tries to improve performance in one area by reducing input in another, even when the two aren't connected. You're not being silly. This is how your brain manages limited cognitive resources. When the task load rises, your system starts muting the noise, literally and figuratively, to conserve bandwidth for whatever matters most. In reality, lowering the music doesn't improve your vision, but your brain's cross-modal attentional system assumes that fewer distractions will sharpen your focus, and it doesn't always care if the logic checks out. It's the same reason you instinctively turn things down to remember directions or pause a video to answer a complicated text. It's not synesthesia, it's just your brain misfiring its own priorities and deciding in that moment that volume is the bottleneck. Reading without absorbing. Your eyes read the entire sentence. You reach the end of the paragraph, you maybe even turn the page, but you remember nothing. This is what happens when your visual input runs on autopilot, but your attention never shows up. You technically read the words, your eyes tracked each line, your brain saw the sentences, but comprehension never kicked in. In other words, the lights were on, but nobody was home. It's not a reading problem, it's a focus allocation failure. Your brain decided some other internal process, a thought loop, a distraction, a random memory, mattered more than the text. So the reading got demoted to background noise. You kept going out of habit, like hearing a song you're not really listening to. This is why rereading the same paragraph 5 times doesn't help. It's not your memory that failed, it's that the memory never got created in the first place. If attention is the gatekeeper for learning, you never walk through the door. Repeating a story you forgot you told. You're halfway through a story, confident it's brand new, when your friend gives you that look. The one that says, "Yeah, you told me this already." And now you're trapped, too deep to stop, too embarrassed to keep going. This happens because your brain doesn't always tag memories with who heard them. It remembers the event of telling the story, but not the audience. So when you retrieve the memory, it feels like you've only thought about telling it, not actually said it out loud. It's a glitch in what's called source monitoring, the brain's ability to track where memories come from. You might vividly remember a conversation, a thought, or a scene, but not whether it was real, imagined, or already spoken. To your brain, thinking about telling someone a story and actually telling them can feel almost identical. The more vivid or rehearsed the memory, the easier it is to misfire. So you press play again, unaware that your audience already sat through the premiere. Forgetting mid-sentence. You're mid-thought, mid-sentence, and then nothing. You know there was a point. You know you were heading somewhere, but your brain drops the thread like a clumsy juggler, and all you're left with is a blank space in your skull. This kind of memory wipe happens when your working memory, the mental scratch pad where temporary information gets held, overloads or gets interrupted. Your brain was holding your thought like a tab open in a browser, but something, a noise, a sudden distraction, or just a stray intrusive idea, closed the tab before you saved your work. And the worst part? You often feel the shape of the thought. You know it was important. You can sense its urgency or its cleverness, but it's gone. Your brain just quietly ejected you from your own conversation. Frequency illusion, also known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. You learn a new word or buy a new model car, and suddenly it's everywhere. Billboards, articles, casual conversation. You can't help but wonder, was this always here? That's frequency illusion. Once your brain flags something as newly relevant, it shifts your attention to it. It doesn't actually appear more often. You just start noticing. The brain's pattern detector is hypersensitive to novelty plus repetition. That combination lights up your awareness system like a beacon. So when something new enters your mental database, whether it's a rare animal, a slang term, or a medical condition, your brain highlights every future sighting as significant, even if it's just coincidence. You're not manifesting it, and it's not a sign from the universe. It's just your brain updating its search algorithm. The doorway effect. You walk into a room and stop cold. Wait, why did you come in here? This isn't a memory problem, it's a context shift. Your brain chunks information into location-based packets, and crossing a physical threshold, like a doorway, can trigger it to flush the current working memory and prepare for new input. It treats the entry as a reset point. New room, new task. The information wasn't lost, it was shelved. But now it's been nudged out of reach, just far enough that you can't grab it. So you stand there, confused, until the original trigger, a visual cue, a smell, a thought fragment, resurfaces and the memory clicks back into place. That, or you go back into the room you came from and voila, you remember again. Your brain doesn't see a doorway, it sees a scene change, and sometimes the plot of the last one gets left behind. It's not just mistakes, it's deception. Your brain actively filters reality to fit what it wants to see. These are the blatant hallucinations you treat as truth. Perspective memory error. You know that moment where you say, I don't need to write this down, I'll totally remember it. Yeah, that's a lie. Your brain just conned you. This is called a perspective memory error, the mistake of assuming you'll remember to do something in the future and then not. It's the same mental scam that convinces you, I'll remember to take the laundry out of the washer later, except later turns into tomorrow, and now everything smells like a wet dog. The brain is built to store memories of things that already happened, not to remind you about things you haven't done yet. Perspective memory depends on something called cue detection. You only remember when the right trigger shows up in your environment. If the cue never arrives, the task never makes it back into your conscious mind. That's why future you always gets screwed by present you. Present you is cocky. Present you thinks he's a genius with an exceptional memory. Meanwhile, future you is standing in the kitchen at 7 p.m., realizing you forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer this morning. The hilarious part is how confident we are when we make the assumption. We honestly feel like we'll remember. That is, until you forget your anniversary and your spouse reminds you with the icy silence of 1,000 winters. False consensus effect. One of the most embarrassing mental shortcuts you can take is the false consensus effect. The mistaken assumption that everyone thinks the way you do. Seems reasonable, until reality makes it painfully clear that they don't. Like when someone blurts out a political opinion at a baseball game, convinced the whole section of the stadium is on their side, and then shoves their foot so far into their mouth they're practically flossing with their shoelaces. The false consensus effect is the psychological pitfall where you take your personal perspective and accidentally project it onto the entire room. Psychologists explain this as a mix of social projection and motivated reasoning. We assume others share our views partly because it makes our worldview feel validated. Then, the people and ideas most available to you, your friends, social feeds, co-workers, reinforce this assumption. So your perspective feels like the standard, even if it's not. So you think, well, I believe this, and the people around me believe this, so most people probably do too. Except the problem is, your sample size is just you, and a handful of people who already agree with you. The stronger you feel about something, the more certain you become that everyone else agrees, which means the false consensus effect doesn't just make you wrong, it makes you confidently wrong. The spotlight effect. You walk into a room with a coffee stain on your shirt and immediately think, oh no, everyone's staring at me. Guess what? They're probably not. This is the spotlight effect. The mistaken belief that other people are paying way more attention to you than they actually are. Psychologists chalk it up to egocentric bias. Since you see life through your own lens, your brain tricks you into thinking your actions are front and center for everyone else. But honestly, most people are way too wrapped up in their own problems, their bills, their deadlines, or maybe even their own coffee stains to notice yours. The disconnect comes because you replay your mistakes in your head, making them feel huge. Meanwhile, others barely register them. They might notice for a second, then move on. That mismatch is why your brain swears you're in the spotlight, even when you're not. The funny part is that everyone else is caught in their own spotlight effect, sweating over their own slip-ups. So while you're worried they're judging your coffee stain, they're stressing about their own bad hair day or that awkward email they sent. Truth is, nobody's paying as much attention as you think. We're all just trying to get through the day. The Barnum effect. You've probably read a horoscope or taken a personality test and thought, wow, that's so me. That's the Barnum effect at play. The tendency to believe vague, general statements are all about you, when in reality they could fit just about anyone. It's named after P.T. Barnum, the showman who boasted he had something for everyone. Like a one-size-fits-all t-shirt, these statements are broad enough to cover most people, but your brain makes them feel like a custom fit. It works because we naturally look for meaning that relates to us, even in generic information. Take a statement like, "You sometimes doubt whether you've made the right decision," which can seem deeply personal to almost anyone. We all have doubts, which is why it feels so spot on. The Barnum effect shows how easily we can be convinced that something vague is uniquely about us, just because we want it to be. So the next time a horoscope or personality quiz feels spot on, ask your neighbor or even their dog if it describes them too. Confirmation bias. The confirmation bias is like your brain's overly enthusiastic yes man, always nodding along to whatever you already believe. It's the tendency to spot, remember, and cling to things that back up your opinions, while giving a hard pass to anything that disagrees. Say you're convinced your new car brand is the greatest thing on four wheels. Suddenly, every article, review, and random chat at the gas station seems to confirm your genius choice. Negative reviews? You write those off as just haters or fake news. This happens because we're bombarded with so much information, so the brain takes shortcuts by reinforcing what you already believe instead of sifting through endless material. The downside? Your perspective gets lopsided. You're not seeing the world as it is, but as you expect it to be. That's why your uncle still swears his football team is Super Bowl bound, despite its epic losing streak. The confirmation bias explains why conspiracy theories stick, why arguments on the internet never change anyone's mind, and why people can watch the same event and come away with completely different takes. Once your brain settles on a belief, it's wired to keep proving itself right. Cry wolf effect. You're dead asleep in a hotel at 3 a.m. when the smoke detector starts shrieking. Do you leap out of bed, heart racing? Nope. You groan, pull the pillow over your head, and mutter, "Ugh, probably some prankster yanking the alarm again." The one time it's a real fire, half the guests are still snoozing, trained by too many false alarms to just not care. Psychologists often explain this in terms of habituation or alarm fatigue, the same mechanism that makes you stop noticing the smell of your own cologne after 10 minutes, or traffic humming outside your window after a week. When alarms go off too often for no good reason, your brain gets desensitized. The trouble is that when the real threat shows up, you're more likely to ignore it. That's the cry wolf effect. Warnings that fire too often stop feeling like warnings at all. The more you hear them, the less you trust them. In the end, it's not the fake alarms that get you. It's the real one you sleep through. Change blindness. You're cruising through town and a shiny new restaurant catches your eye. You point it out, all excited, only for your partner to say, "Babe, that's been there for months." Welcome to change blindness, the brain's sneaky way of missing obvious changes right in front of you. It happens because attention is a limited resource. Your brain doesn't snap a perfect photo of the world. It sketches a rough outline and fills in the gaps with assumptions. As long as the overall scene feels consistent, you don't register the restaurant that popped up, your friend's new haircut, or the fact that your coworker shaved off the mustache he had for 10 years. Although it usually works out okay, it leaves blind spots where the obvious hides in plain sight. It's why movie bloopers sneak past you, why eyewitnesses miss key details, and why, when your partner asks, "Notice anything different?" you're already sweating, knowing you're about to guess wrong. Focusing illusion. Ever caught yourself thinking, if I could just lose 20 pounds or get that fancy car, then everything in life would fall into place? That's the focusing illusion messing with you. It's the bias where we overestimate how much one specific change will magically fix our overall happiness. Why do we fall for it? Because when we picture the future, our brains instinctively grab onto the one thing we think we can control. Dropping weight, scoring a better job, or buying that dream car seems like a shiny lever we can pull to fix everything. It's a lot easier to focus on that than to deal with the tangled mess of life. Work deadlines, family chaos, or that surprise bill that shows up out of nowhere. Our mind hypes up that one controllable variable, blowing its importance way out of proportion. while quietly shoving life's other hassles into the background. That mental shortcut creates a distorted forecast, where the single change feels like a game changer. But when you actually get there, the background noise comes flooding back, and the magic fades fast. Actor-observer bias. Ever notice how when someone else cuts you off in traffic, you instantly assume they're just a terrible driver? But if you cut someone off, it's totally justified. Maybe you were late for a meeting, or just missed them in your blind spot. That's the actor-observer bias in a nutshell. When you're the actor judging your own actions, you blame external circumstances. But when you're the observer watching someone else, you assume it's an internal trait or personality flaw. It happens because when it's about you, you know the whole story. But with others, you don't have that context, so you assume it's just who they are. It's the same deal when you miss a deadline. You know it's because life threw you a dozen curveballs, but if your coworker blows one, you're side-eyeing them, thinking they've just been binge-watching Netflix. Basically, we're the heroes of our own story, but everyone else, they're the bumbling side characters who just can't get it together. Planning fallacy. You tell yourself, this'll only take an hour, and then 3 days later, you're knee-deep in half-built IKEA furniture, staring at an empty pizza box, wondering where it all went wrong. That's the planning fallacy, our knack for wildly underestimating how much time, effort, or cash a task will actually take. Why do we do this? When we plan, we're daydreaming about the best-case scenario. No interruptions, no mistakes, no doom scrolling on our phones. In essence, your brain drafts a schedule for a superhuman version of you, the one who's efficient, disciplined, and immune to distractions. Then, reality crashes in with traffic jams, missing screws, or a coworker who just needs 5 minutes, and your perfect plan suddenly collapses. The planning fallacy explains why projects drag on, budgets explode, and you still believe you can get ready in just 5 minutes. We don't just underestimate time. We build plans on wishful assumptions, which is why that quick email before bed leaves you blinking at the clock, wondering how it's already 2 a.m. Illusion of control. You hit the elevator button 3 times, hoping it will speed things up. You blow on your dice before rolling and wear your lucky socks on game day because clearly the team depends on you. That's the illusion of control, the belief that you can influence outcomes that you have no effect on. Psychologists trace it to the brain's preference for order over chaos. Linking your actions to results feels comforting, like you've got a grip on things. Pressing the button, repeating the ritual, or yelling at your TV gives you a sense of power. And once in a while, pure coincidence rewards the superstition, which only cements the illusion further. It's mostly harmless when it comes to dice or socks, but this mindset can sneak into bigger stakes, like investors swearing they can time the market, or folks buying lottery tickets with their foolproof system. We're so desperate for control, we'll invent it. But let's face it, no matter how many times you pound that elevator button, it's still arriving on its own schedule. The Dunning-Kruger effect. There's always that person who's watched one YouTube tutorial and now thinks they're a master at crypto, wine tasting, or fixing a leaky faucet. They strut in, brimming with confidence, ready to school everyone. Meanwhile, actual experts, people who've spent years on the subject, tend to pause, second guess, and admit there's still plenty they don't know. The Dunning-Kruger effect happens because ignorance and expertise are mirror opposites. When you're a beginner, you don't know enough to spot your own mistakes, so you think you're nailing it. But as you gain real skill, you start seeing the complexities, the exceptions, and the gaps in your knowledge, which makes you less certain, not more. Confidence and competence don't always go hand in hand. The newbie might be the loudest, most certain voice in the room, while the expert is quietly wrestling with doubt. So next time someone's preaching with total conviction, take it with a grain of salt. They might just be one YouTube video deep and convinced they're a pro. Naive realism. Every argument is the same. You're calm, logical, and laying out the facts as they obviously are. The other person? Totally biased, blinded by their feelings, or brainwashed by bad information. Welcome to naive realism, the rock-solid belief that you see the world objectively, and anyone who disagrees must be the ones who are wrong. It happens because perception isn't a perfect lens. Everything you see gets filtered through your upbringing, culture, values, and expectations. But because that filter is invisible, it feels like you're looking through clear glass. Your version of reality feels like the reality. No question. The problem is obvious. If both sides think they're being perfectly rational, then every disagreement becomes proof that the other side is ignorant or crazy. That's why political debates go nowhere, family feuds last decades, and why you're secretly convinced you're the only person on the road who knows how to drive. We all believe we see the world as it is, which means everyone else has to be delusional. Now you have the playbook. Whether it's a manipulator or your own mind, the only defense is knowing the pattern. Thanks for watching.